good day everybody, this is Joe. Hey, back in February of 2018, I had made a couple little pinhole cameras. This one is made of 1.5" PVC pipe. It uses a piece of plastic notebook cover as a kind of a rotating shutter, and it just pulls apart, and you use 2¼ inch squares of Harman Direct Positive Paper or paper negatives to make these nice one-of-a-kind little prints. I was having fun with this earlier this year. Haven't done as much of this lately as I should have, but I made a couple of these cameras. This one spray painted the caps blue. It has the rotating shutter. This one I ran out of the plastic material for the shutter, so I'm just using a piece of gaffer's tape on this one for the shutter, and I haven't painted the caps yet. I have a whole bag full of these caps and a piece of pipe, and I can make a whole bunch more of these, but I have a project that's coming up early in August, and that is I have to do a presentation to a group of local Albuquerque-based film photographers, and we're going to meet down at a coffee shop on a Sunday morning, and I'm going to do a presentation and a demonstration of how to expose and process these direct positive prints, and I'm going to do it in a coffee shop. So normally when I process these direct positive prints or conventional paper negatives, I'm going to be doing it at home, so I have access to my darkroom, all my supplies, my chemicals, my containers, my developing tank. I have the convenience of my darkroom to go in quickly to change out the paper from the camera into a developing tank. And so it's real convenient when you have a darkroom available like that. But I'm going to be processing all this out in a public place, out in a coffee shop. So I need to have everything together at once. And so the first thing I had to do is figure out, make a list, right? What do I need to take with me so I can do all this? And so the first thing you need in order to make a list is, of course, a typewriter. And so my list, I had to sit down and think, what do I need on my list of materials to process this photo paper? Well, first of all, of course, I need my cameras. I'm going to preload. I'm going to use 2 cameras because I can develop 2 direct positive 1¼ square prints at the same time in my developing tank. So I'm going to actually preload these 2 cameras at home before I go out to the coffee shop. But after I take my exposure, I'm going to have to transfer the prints to my developing tank. So I'm going to need a changing bag, and that reminds me we're also going to need the developing tank itself. Now this is a steel 35mm developing tank, the kind that you would use with 2 metal reels for 2 rolls of 35mm film, but I tape the prints on the inside of the tank without any reels in it with loops of painter's masking tape. So I'm going to need some painter's masking tape, and I'm going to be processing this tank on its side like this, rotary style. And so I'm going to need a rotary base, and so I'm going to bring my portable little rotary base. It's made out of a piece of plywood that's been painted, and these little caster wheels, and this little base sits here and spins like that. Next, I'm going to need some containers of chemistry, developer, stop bath, and fixer. And so I have this little container, and in the container I have other containers. So I have these little oval-shaped little cups that have lids on them, and I have developer, stop bath, and fixer. So these are going to each hold about 85 milliliters of chemistry. And also I use a water rinse between each step in the processing, plus 2 water rinses after the fixer. So I have 4 little cups for water that I will fill up at the coffee shop in the restroom using the sink in the restroom. I don't want cold water, I want just room temperature tap water. And in the processing of these direct positive prints, I will be emptying the chemicals, the developer, stop bath, and fixer, back into their original cups. But the water I don't really want to save, so I have a wastewater container. This is my old cup I've been using, Blake's Lotaburger cup that I've been using for years, so I just will dump the water steps back into this cup, and when I'm done with it, so I always have a cup here. And I need, of course, a way to do this on the table in the coffee shop without making a mess. And so I'm going to bring some paper towels, right? That always comes in handy. You got to have some paper towels. Now, I like to time my process when I'm doing my rotary processing, and I use a little battery-powered kitchen timer. I've been using this for years. So there's my timer I'm going to use for that. Once the prints are processed, I'll open up the lid, and they're going to be wet. I'm going to peel them off the inside walls of the tank, and I'm going to probably hand them around to the group, and they can look at it. But I brought my little film squeegee so I can kind of squeegee off the prints a little. I don't want to just, wipe a paper towel across the front surface of a fiber-based print. That's going to ruin it with paper particles and fibers. So you want to, kind of squeegee it off, keep it nice and clean. So I got my squeegee there. The print is going to need to be archivally rinsed, but in the meantime, between finishing the processing and the rest of the meeting, I want a place to safely put these prints so they'll stay clean. And after I squeegee them and let them air dry superficially, I'm going to put them in these little protector sleeves that I brought. So I need protector sleeves. And of course, when I get them home, I'll do the finished rinsing. And then I need a carrying kit to carry all this stuff in. And you could go real fancy with this, and you could get a fancy photographer's backpack, or a real super expensive armored box or something. But I'm going to get one of these $1 or 50-cent little cloth shopping bag thingies that you get at the grocery store or whatever. And the only thing is, I put a piece of corrugated cardboard in the bottom of the bag so that it kind of holds it open and it makes it a little bit stronger. And now I can dump all this stuff in here. I'll be walking from wherever I parked at on the morning of this project. I'll just be walking with this bag, and it's going to look like I've either been shopping or it'll look like I'm homeless. So I got that going for me. Oh yeah, one other thing is, in order for me to actually, practically speaking, make photographs with these cameras, I'm going to need a way to mount them on a tripod. So what I made for these small little cameras is I have a little block of scrap wood, and I've mounted a 1/4 bushing on the bottom of it. I put some adhesive felt on the other side, and I have a couple little brass cup hooks. And so I have these fat rubber bands, elastic bands, that will fit over the two cup hooks. And then to mount the camera, you just put the rubber band over the top of the camera like that, and then you can mount the block on your little lightweight tripod. You could use either a little tabletop tripod, or you could use a full-size tripod, or you could just set it on the ground. And then, of course, this camera has a peel-off shutter. The other one has the sliding shutter, rotating shutter like that. But that's what you need, is a little mounting block. Now, if you're a pinhole photographer, you might have your own methodology for metering your exposures or determining exposures. Myself, I've learned to rely on a light meter. I use a little calculator. So each camera has a piece of tape on it that indicates the F number of the camera. This one's F160. This one's F150. I try to make the pinholes as close as in size as they can be, but they're each individually very unique. So I try to accurately measure the pinhole so I know the focal ratio. I've covered this in other videos, but just a kind of a refresher to remind you, if you're interested in this, how I happen to expose my pinhole camera shots. I'm basing my exposures on a light meter reading, and I used to use a Gaussian Lunapro F. Right now I'm using the Sekonic L308, which is probably the least expensive decent meter. The L308 is a shutter speed priority light meter, which is different from the other meter. So you're going to need to know the f-stop, the focal ratio of your camera. This camera is f150. So you have to basically measure the diameter of your pinhole divided into the focal length of the camera. F150, have the camera set up on the tripod. I have my composition framed. And then you're going to have to know the ISO of your film or paper. Now I'm using Harman Direct Positive Paper, and the working ISO that I use is typically around 6 to 9. In the summertime, in the winter when there's less UV light, I usually go down to like 3 or whatever. And with the meter set to ISO 6, I get a reading, and I'm going to bump up the f-stop to the highest number, which on this meter it only goes up to f90 point something. This is f90.5, and it's indicating 8 seconds. So that's an 8-second recommended exposure time for f90.5. But my camera is not f90.5, it's f150, so I have to do a conversion. So this is why I always carry a little calculator with me. You could use your smartphone, but for me, philosophically, I don't really carry a smartphone when I'm out pinhole photographying. Pinhole photographying. So we're going to take the focal ratio of the camera, which is 150, and we're going to divide it by the 90.5 reading on the light meter. Okay, then we're going to square it, which is times equals. So the ratio of the two f-stops squared, and then we're going to multiply it by the meter reading that the meter gave, which is 8 seconds. So times 8 seconds. And that gives a corrected reading of about 22 seconds. And this 22 seconds, you could use your smartphone, the timer function on your smartphone to time 22 seconds, or you could have a wristwatch with a sweep second hand. This is a single hand wristwatch. It doesn't have a sweep second hand at all. So I go out typically with my little analog watch with a sweep second hand, and that's how I typically time my exposures. If you're not wearing any watch, and if you're not carrying your smartphone, just count 1 1000, 2 1000, 3 1000, etc. But that's basically how I do my exposures. I'm metering at the highest f-stop that the meter will read, but it's typically not as high as the pinhole camera's f-stop is, and you do the conversion. Again, the ratio of the two f-stops squared, multiply that by the exposure time recommended on the meter, and that gives you the corrected exposure time. Now, this technique does not account for reciprocity failure of your film or paper. I'm not using film, I'm using photo paper, specifically Harman Direct Positive Paper, which in normal exposure circumstances that I'm familiar with, I've not seen a significant amount of reciprocity failure, so I don't even compensate for that at all. And I don't either for paper negatives, which is one nice thing about shooting paper. Is you don't have to worry about that. Well, that's my little pinhole technique. That's what I'm going to be using when I go down to the Michael Thomas Coffee Shop on August 5th, Sunday morning at 9:30, and demonstrate this pinhole shooting technique and processing with Harman Direct Positive Paper and pinhole cameras. So all told, here's the kit in its finished form in the little shopping bag I'll be carrying. Looks pretty nondescript, and you know, it just could be anything I'm carrying in here. So it has everything I think I'll need to be able to expose, transfer into the developing tank, and process the finished direct positive prints. And so I'll be doing 2 exposures on that particular morning. And so yeah, so I've been meeting up with this group of New Mexico-based film photographers. And we have a Flickr group that we use to connect and to communicate. Well, this is Joe Van Cleve. Maybe this video hopefully gave you guys some ideas for how you can process your paper negatives or direct positive prints away from the convenience of your home-based darkroom. Until next time, you guys have yourselves a great day.